Where did he go? Where did Dover go?
What?
Still need a copy? Who needs a copy? Who needed a copy yesterday? You didn't need a copy? Who needed a copy? You got? Everybody else? Okay, we started as base. Page what? One on your safer. What is it? Page? 112. Thank you. And the Rebbe started explaining to us the pasuk Adam ki yakri mikem korban lavayim min a behema min a bakar min a tzayin takrivas korbanchem. What happened to our board? Why is our board so low? Can someone help me please pick up the board? We'll put it on my table. You do most of it. I'll just pretend. You'll be like God and I'll do my shit. Hello, what have you been? Huh? I did. No, I was on the roof. Nate, I gave you more room. We moved down, so you have room. Because you're Nate. Because you're the Nate. Adam ki yakriv mikem korban lavaya. Min habehema, min habakar. We'll go down here. Umin hatzayin. Takrivu es korban. That's the pasuk. That's the pasuk in the beginning of Vayikra. Vayikra Aleph. Basically, the first pasuk that begins to describe our Avayim. Okay? So now, grammatically, this word, mikem, should be here. Should be Adam mikem ki yakriv korban. A person from amongst you who wants to sacrifice a korban. Adam ki yakriv mikem seems to indicate that a person who sacrifices a korban from amongst you. Korban is from amongst you, which obviously it isn't, but obviously in communities it will be. Right? Korban lavai. Mina behema, klal. Mina bakar or mina tzayin, prat. Right? Which you say every day before davening in the Yom Midas. Gracious band. Part you don't pay any attention to before Shivani Beis Hamikdash, right? That part? Okay? Mina behema. Klal, general rule. Then details, specific expressions of that. Mina bakar, mina tzayin. Takrivu es korbanchem. Sacrifice your sacrifice. This actually might be another klal, which means it's a klal prat, a klal. Or it could just be a klal prat. Okay? Say this, so that's the pasuk. And that pasuk is going to serve as the source of understanding what Avodas Hashem is all about. Because this is the first pasuk in Vayikra, and Vayikra begins the discussion of how to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? We talked about it yesterday. Okay. So let's start. We got up to the top of the next page just because we were, I don't know, why am I blaming you for this? Because I was stuck on getting to the top of the next page just to progress. Oh, there's the eraser. Okay. So we'll start from the last three lines on the first page. The l'chu'ur at first glance yuksha. It's difficult. De'im haisa kavanase bezeh. That if the intention of this was, page 113, rak levar mishpatei hakorban, only to explain the laws of a korban, have le'lemar, it should have said, Adam mikem ki yakriv korban lavaya, a person from amongst you who sacrifices a korban to Hashem, hine kach v'kach yeh mishpat huvasa korban, v'ilchaisav, this will be the halachas of that korban, of bringing the korban. So the Rebbe now asks, Umipnei ma oimer Adam ki yakriv mikem. So why does it say, instead of Adam mikem ki yakriv, which is the proper grammatical form, why does it say Adam ki yakriv mikem? Unusual form. Now, of course, we always know that when the Torah writes something in an unusual way, it's coming to teach me an extra idea that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And usually that idea, interestingly enough, I mean, it happens to be very interesting. Generally, once you learn the idea, especially the idea in Pneumius, so then the Pneumistic Pshat is the simple way of reading the pasuk. Once you understand what it's really meaning, so then this is, of course, what it should say. So that's what's going to happen here. Elo, Yadua Kavana Bezeh. It's well known the Kavana Bezeh, so we can skip the next page because it's well known and everybody knows it. And why even bother? I mean, you all know it, and so why even spend any time learning? It says right here, well known, right? Okay, maybe it's not well known by everybody. Who? Shabbat levar klolis inyan karbonis ba'aveda b'nefesh adam. As we said in the beginning of the chapter yesterday. This is coming to explain the general idea of karbonis in aveda in the soul of a person. V'zeu. Now the Rebbe is going to say pshat in the pasuk, word for word, all the way through the pasuk. Adam ki yakriv. Okay, the first three words of the pasuk. That's the introduction. Adam ki yakriv, a person. Now in pshat it means a person who wants. Karov means close. Yakriv means to bring close, to cause something to be close, right? He feel. So that's the simple pshat. But the Rebbe is going to explain it in a slightly different way. Adam ki yakriv, a person who brings close. What does that mean? Ha'adam, a person, kasher yiskarev le'elokus, when he approaches godliness, hu mikem korban levaya, it's from you a korban to Hashem. What does that mean? The Rebbe says something quite astounding. What everybody thinks the Rebbe is about to say is you have to sacrifice yourself as a korban, and he's not going to say that yet. He is going to say that, but not yet. There's a more important idea first. And this is the first thing the Eibishter tells us when he starts engaging us in serving him in a serious way. It's really quite astounding. Adam ki yakriv, Adam kasher yiskarev le'elokus, when a person comes close to the Eibishter, hini mikem hu korban lavaya, from you is a korban to Hashem. Mikem hu bachem talui adavar. It's dependent on you. Mikem hu bachem, from you, on you, talui, dependent, adavar, this thing. It depends on you, liyos korban lavaya, to be a korban. You want to come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, upon whom does this depend? You. Hainu, liyos karev elavaya. Adam ki yakriv, a person who wants to come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, mikem, it's dependent on you. Liyos mikem korban lavaya, to be close to the Eibishter. You want to come close? It's up to you to be close. How do I do that? Okay, well, let's see. Hainu liyos karev elavaya, the Yadua. As is known, what are korbanos about? Korbanos are all about the elevation of, bringing close to their source in godliness, the powers and senses of that animal. That's the idea of a korban, elevating the animal to its source in elokus. And of course, there's the idea that the animal is in our place, similar to the whole story of the Akedah. Uba bezel levar. This comes to explain a basic inyan in Avodah. The kasher ba liskarev elokus. When someone wants to come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu mikem, it's dependent on you. Hainu shetalui adavar bechem. It depends on you. Now, of course, as soon as someone hears that, their nefesh bahamis, in the guise of a yetzer hara, will immediately start thinking about guilt and how if I don't do it, it's my fault, and all sorts of nonsense like that. So, of course, that's not where the Rebbe is going, because that's not Kedusha, that's Klipa. All right? What does this all mean in Kedusha, in holiness? Well, let's see. Hainu shedavar talui adavar bachem. The al yemer adam. What should a person not say? Eches karev elokus. How can I come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu? Ubefrat, particularly, kasher yodei mahuso ha'atzmi. A person knows himself. Now here it says his essential being, but when we say his essential being, we're not talking about etzem and neshama, as we were talking about when we were learning our Rebbe's Maamer explaining this Maamer. Right? But he's talking about his essential being as a conscious person down here in Olam Hazah, meaning we know what we're really like. And what do we know, therefore? Shuba shifless, that on a certain level we might be lowly. Umeluchlach become inyanim loy tevim, and might be soiled by certain things that are not particularly good. Right? We know things about ourselves that we're smart enough not to broadcast to the world. There are people who are very, very silly and decide that the whole world has to know just how cracked and ridiculous they are. Okay, most people are adult enough and smart enough to know that they have filters, and those filters are to not necessarily let everybody know everything that's going on in your head. Right, and one little point, which Izzy always nods when I say this, your wife also doesn't have to know. So just leave her out of your being a maniac, okay? She doesn't have to know everything you think and everything you feel and everything you want to do. She doesn't have to know that, right? Keep it to yourself, right? Oh, but I want an open and honest relationship. Right, you'll have about 8 of them. You want one that works? Keep it to yourself. Right?
That's easy.
Okay, so a person knows, we all know what we're about, and we know certain aspects of ourselves that aren't particularly impressive even to ourselves. That doesn't mean we're a horrible, terrible person. That's not what the Rebbe is saying. But there's certain aspects of us that might be embarrassing to ourselves also. Okay, so then I might ask about myself, okay, the guy sitting next to me, I'm sure he can come too close to the Eibishter because I look at him and I see how he acts. And I see he's like a really amazing guy. And he probably doesn't have any of the issues that I have. And of course he can come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. But my problem is the guy whose teeth I brush, how can he come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu? Because I know what he's all about. I know his cavities in panemius and chitzonius. Okay. So I might think that. V'im came, therefore he might think about himself. Who betachli serichuk melokus, that he's very far from the Eibishter. And on a certain level, we are. Ve'eches karev lelokus, and so how will I come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu? Again, I have faith in you. I'm just not so sure about my faith in myself, because I know what I'm dealing with. It's always astounding when the Rebbeim say this to us, because they don't have these things and they're not dealing with it, but they tell us about it and they understand who we are better than we do, even though they don't experience all the craziness that we experience. It's always amazing to me how they describe our nefesh bahamis in such a real and vivid way, even though they don't have one like we do. They have an nefesh bahamis, it's just all godly. They don't know what ours looks like. Well, they do, completely. From a completely different vantage point. It's so interesting. Okay, so we might ask about ourselves. How can I come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu? What's the first thing the Eibishter says to us in Sefer V'Yikra when he starts describing our service of him? He says, Adam ki yakriv mikem, a person who wants to come close to me, so to speak, the Eibishter is saying, it's dependent on you. And what does that mean? So let's see what that means according to the Rebbe. Val zeu omer mikem. About this, relative to this, he says, the pasuk says, the Eibishter says, mikem, bachem adavar talui. It's dependent on you. Again, not the negative aspect, the positive aspect. What does that mean? The kol echad ve'echad misrael, every single Jew, yochel leimar, is able to say, and is ultimately obligated to say, and there's a medrash, Masai Yagiu Masai Lemaisa Vaisai, when will my deeds reach the deeds of my fathers, Avram, Yitzchak, V'Yaakov? That's the end of the medrash. The Rebbe is going to add 4 completely challenging words in a minute, but first we'll just say simple pshat in the medrash. When will my deeds be like the deeds of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? Now, what's the diuk? What's the careful reading of what that medrash says? What aspect of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are you supposed to emulate? Every single one of us. What does it say? You read it carefully. Their righteousness? Their actions. Their deeds. Oh, okay. Aleph base in Tanya. What's a Beinoni all about? Which is something that every one of us can strive to be. Someone whose thought, speech, and action, meaning someone whose conscious reality is completely and totally in line with godliness. Might he have a subconscious Yetzer Hara? Yeah, matter of fact, not mighty, he does. But it never expresses itself in his conscious reality.
So every single one of us can challenge ourselves, the Rebbe just said, that our deed should be like the deeds of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Is our Panemius going to be like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? No, we're not Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We're not tzaddikim like that, and we'll be like that when Mashiach is revealed. It'll all come out. Okay, Beseder. But in the meantime, that's not who we are, and that's not something that we should strive. I mean, we should strive for. Tei tzaddik. It's what the oath that we were administered was: be a tzaddik, but at least don't be a Russian. Meaning, at least allow your conscious activity to be in line with God. And that's what every single person can ask of themselves. That their maisim should be the same as the maisim of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And that's a pretty high bar. And then the Rebbe adds 4 words just to make it more difficult. Vein bezeg bolis klal, and there are no limitations in this. And therefore, don't decide that this is relevant to everybody else in the room, but not to me, and give all the very sophisticated and creative reasons why you can't do it. Instead of using your creativity to figure out why you can't serve God right, use that creativity to figure out how you can serve God right. Usually people have whole long, very sophisticated explanations. Well, my youth and this and that teacher and this happened and the Mets didn't win and whatever it happens to be. The Mets didn't win, I don't think it's part of it anymore in this class, but used to be. So all of these different things that we might say relative to the reasons that we're not accomplishing what it is that the Eibishter thinks we can accomplish in Eilam Hazeh. Thinks he knows, right? If the Eibishter thinks it, he also knows it. Okay. So I might have all sorts of very, very sophisticated reasons. And I can explain it to you at super speed without missing a beat. Okay. We're all good at that. Fine. Turn that off and turn on something else. And what's that? Figure out how you can. You can serve a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Develop a sophisticated appreciation of that and a sophisticated explanation of that. Now, you don't have to spill that to everybody. You don't have to spill the first one to everybody either, but people do. You don't have to spill that to everybody. You just, to yourself. You have to convince yourself that you have a nefesh elokis. You have a godly soul, and that godly soul can serve God. I have an animal soul. God knows you have an animal soul. He created you, and he still said, love me with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your ma'oid. He said that. So I guess that's possible to do because he wouldn't ask me to do something I can't do. Is it hard to do? It might be hard to do. I don't know. I mean, yes, it's hard. So, it was hard to get to do with anything exactly. Messiah Yagi is an amazing line. Chazal say this. This isn't some esoteric Hasidic idea. It's a Maamer Chazal. Tanit Be'eliyahu. It's Eliyahu Navi. When will my deeds reach the deeds of my fathers? Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Ein bezeg bolis klal. The Rebbe says there's no limitation. Now the Rebbe continues, and is even more challenging. Ve'ein shum davar. There is nothing hameineya uma'akev chalila that is preventing chalila, heaven forfend. Lalois ulagia liskarev lelakus. To go up and reach and come close to godliness. The only thing that might be stopping me from doing that is me. This is why the Rebbeim believe in us. This is the ultimate statement of the Eibishter's belief in us. Rabbi Emunasecho, which we say every day. The Eibishter believes in the fact that we can use the day for positive purposes, as we say first thing in the morning. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't come in a tyrannical way. Trunya, I assume it's the root of the word tyranny. It doesn't come in a tyrannical way. What does that mean? He doesn't ask us to do things we can't do, which would be tyrannical. What?
Which word is tyrannical?
Trunya. Tyranny. Same word. Trunya. Right. Two famous Maamerim of the Friedrich Rebbe on that idea itself. One is called Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba B'Trunya B'Di Yosef. That's in Contracing Gimel. Gimel, yeah. It's a 3-volume set of Maamerim of the Friedrich Rebbe called Contracing. Contracing is like pamphlets, but they were all put together into books. And these are very, very basic and important Maamerim of the Friedrich Rebbe. And generally in Lubavitcher yeshivas, when a kid goes into yeshiva after his bar mitzvah, he goes to what here in Eretz Yisrael is called yeshiva katana, and Chutz La'aretz it's called masifta. Usually those are the Maamerim they start learning when they first start learning Chassidus series, in shiur in Cheder they learn a little Chassidus. It's not serious. Once they get to yeshiva, so then it's serious. There's Chassidus every morning before davening. There's Chassidus at night. So once they start learning Chassidus seriously, usually the Maamerim they start with is Kontresim with the Friedrich Rebbe. Very basic Avedic Maamerim that deal with serving God in a very, very basic and understandable way. And then slowly but surely they get to more sophisticated ideas. Right? So in Contrasting Gimel, there's a Maamer called Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'avatrunya, where the Rebbe explains this whole idea very, very clearly. In Contrasting Aleph, there's a Maamer called Ma Toivu Halecho, which also is about, from last week's Parsha, which is also about the idea of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu only asking us to do things which we're able to do, which the Rebbe is going to say here. Umisgala umeir, he's revealed and shines, b'kol echad ve'echad, in each and every one, lefi keiche v'chelta, in accordance with that person's potential and that person's abilities. Meaning the Eibishter shines in us in accordance with our ability to be a kli for that light and express that light. And everybody's different. Ukedi'isa b'medrash Rabbah, as it says in the Medrash Rabbah, another Medrash Chazal, this is in B'midbar Rabbah, Parsha Yud Beis. Kishani mevakesh, this is a Kadosh Baruch Hu talking, so to speak. Kishani mevakesh, when I ask, when I request, when I ask you to do things, eini mevakesh lefi keichi, I'm not asking in accordance with my potential, el lefi keichan, in accordance with their potential. The Eibusher asks us to do things. He doesn't ask us to do things that only he can do. He asks us to do things that we can do. And if there's certain things that we think we can't do, well, he's there helping us do it also. There's obviously nothing he can't do. But he didn't ask us to jump to the moon. Why? Well, we can't do that. He didn't ask us to travel to the moon either, which we can. We figured that out. It took a long time in human history, but that's no mitzvah to do that. He didn't ask us to do that. Okay, so is that a nice thing to do? It's interesting. But it's not a mitzvah. Right? Certainly didn't ask us to jump to the moon. You can't jump to the moon. And you say that once a month. But you say it 3 times, once a month. I can't jump to the moon. Just like I can't jump to the moon, so too. As you jump up and down. Not reaching the moon. Okay. So he didn't ask us to do it. There's that famous story. I heard it from Rabbi Volshansky, Olav Shalom, that he heard it from one of the sons of Rabbi Groner from Australia. Rabbi Groner was in Yechidus, and the Rebbe asked him to do something in Melbourne. And he said to the Rebbe, I don't think I can do that in Melbourne. I just don't think that's going to go in Melbourne. I don't think I can accomplish that. So the Rebbe said, you're my shaliach, I sent you, I'm with you, and I can. Okay, it's the end of that, isn't it? I don't know what happened at the end of the story. He did it, he didn't do it, I don't know. That's not the story, it doesn't matter. Right? Some people get caught up on that part and forget the real part. Right? Wow. Okay. So if the Eibishter asked us to do something, that means he's giving us the kefis to do it. Which is very challenging. But it's so amazing. That's the first thing the Eibishter says in Sefer Vayikra. Adam ki yakriv mikem. You want to come close to me? It's up to you. And up to you again doesn't mean it's your fault if it doesn't happen. That's not how the Eibishter is not fault ridden. That's not his world. Isn't all about whose fault it is. Right? It's a statement challenging us and empowering us to serve him the way that we can, which is really absolutely astounding. V'zeu, and this is pshat, Adam ki yakriv, a person who wants to come close. I'm sorry, we said lefi keichan, lefi ha-keich shel kol echad v'echad, we missed that line. In accordance with the power, the potential of each and every one. Dal yedei zeh, hine b'keich kol echad v'echad, each and every person has the potential and the power, la lois ulagil l'madrega al to reach a very high level of connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Wow. V'zeu Adam ki yakriv. And this is what the pasuk means: a person who wants to come close. De b'chdei sha'adam yiskarev la'lokus Now the Rebbe is going to take a different tack here. And explain the word mikem differently. Up until now, I mean, they're both right. Up until now, how do we explain the word mikem? It's modifying what comes before. That Adam ki Yaakov, if you want to come close to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, it's mikem. Mikem is explaining Adam ki Yaakov. Right? Now the Rebbe is going to explain Adam ki Yaakov, going to come close to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, mikem korban leGani. Now mikem is going to be connected to what comes after it, as opposed to explaining what comes before. And they're both right. It's not a matter of right, wrong. They're both shot in the pasuk. Previous think of shot in the pasuk. Okay. Okay, now, and this is what people usually hear. Oh, we have to take ourselves as a korban. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's see. V'zeu Adam ki yakriv, debechdei she'adam yiskarev le'elokus, that in order that a person should come close to the Eibishter, hu mikem, shebechem adavar talui, which we've said, it's dependent on you. V'hainu mikem korban lavaya, and this is what it means, from you a korban l'Hashem, connecting mikem to what comes after it, as opposed to just what comes before it. To mikem takrivu as a korban lavaya. From you sacrifice the korban to Hashem. The eina kavana, the intention of this pasuk is not rak only. Hakorban shel behema bilvad. The sacrifice of the actual animal on the mizbeach, which of course is the pshat in the pasuk. Ki'im, but also, rather, mikem mamish, from you mamish. And what does that mean now? What's the pasuk say? Now we're going to say pshat in the whole pasuk. Adam ki yakriv. A person who wants to come, we're going to say this. This is based on the second pshat that we're saying now. Adam ki yakriv. A person who wants to come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Mikem korban lavaya. From you is a korban. From what? Mina behema. From your behema. What's your behema? Mina behamis. What's a sacrifice? A sacrifice elevates something. So you have to elevate your nefesh habahamis. Mina bakar, mina tzoyin. We'll see what that means. Cattle and sheep. We'll see. Ki mikem mamish. V'hu mina behema. It's from the behema. And what's that behema? Ha behema shebeliba shel adam. The behema that's in the heart of a person. Shu nefesh habahamis. Which is his animal soul. Mina bakar, mina tzoyin. We'll get back to all this, but let's just get the basic pshat. Mina bakar, mina tzoyin, from cattle or sheep. What's that? Hein heima hapratim madregas tiyeshnam b'nefesh habahamis. These are the different levels that there are in nefesh habahamis. There's different types of nefesh habahamis. Ukiyadua, the Rebbe says. Ha'inyanim b'zeh. The idea of this. The eina doim, it's not similar. Ha'oifani habirurim, the way of birurim, of rectification, of elevation, of illumination, b'kol echad v'echad, in each and every person. Everybody's different. Why? The yeshnai, there are people, right? Shanefesh b'hamis shaloi, that is nefesh b'hamis who's shor nagach, it's like a goring ox, ubal midas gases b'yeseh, and he's unbelievably crass. V'yesh, there are other people, shutzain, it's like a sheep. Shu behema daka, which is like a small animal. I mean, what should you rather have walking around in your living room? A cow, an ox, or a sheep? I think I'd go for the sheep. He's probably going to do a little less damage in there. The ox could destroy the place. Okay. So some people's nefesh habahamis is like a shore. We'll come back to this. Some people's nefesh habahamis is like a sheep. Afshes gam zeh b'chlal behema, but the sheep is still a behema. It's just a more refined behema. Aval hu b'dakar so kopanim, but he's more refined. He's more subtle. So everybody has their own nefesh habahamis. Everybody has their own avodah to do. What's so important about that? And that's what makes Mayanot so unique. Because you guys somehow figured this out. I don't know how you figured it out. But it's not self-understood. No one is in the kishkas of anybody else trying to get them to be as firm as they are, so to speak. Which itself is a sign of a person not being sensitive to God if he's not sensitive to the person next to him. Because what does everybody seem to understand? I don't know how this happens all the time, but this is one of the most important things about this place and why it works. Everybody seems to have this intuitive understanding that different people are dealing with different things in their Avodas Hashem. And so what I find easy, he might find difficult. And what I find difficult, he might find easy. Right? Getting up in the morning. Oh, these lowlives who don't get up for Chassidus. Now you have to get up for Chassidus. There's no excuse not to get up for Chassidus. Some people getting up for Chassidus is very easy. Some people getting up for Chassidus is very hard. Right? It might be that guy who's up at 6:30 every morning and he's learning in Zal already for an hour before Chassidus, and he's beseder, he's incredible, he's amazing, and you can keep doing that, and it's a wonderful thing. But then there's another guy who like walks in at 7:40 rubbing his eyes. It might be that guy who gets up at 6:30. If he had the same Yetzer Hara to stay in bed as that guy who shows up at 7:40, he'd be in bed until 11:30. You don't know. You don't know what that guy who shows up at 7:40 is dealing with to get out of bed. Because everybody has a different Yetzer Hara. Some people are good at this, some people are good at this, some people not so good at this, some people not so good at this, right? Everybody has that. Some people are goring ox. What's that? That's like, the Chicago Bears football fan watching a game in December with no shirt on with a C written on his chest. Bah! Just push it up a behemoth like unbelievable. A college football fan. Why do I have to say an adult? College football fan. I once had I can't say it was the joy. I once spent Shabbos in Gainesville, Florida, on the day that the University of Florida Gators played a football game. And it was one of the most bizarre sociological experiences I've ever had in my life. 100,000 people drunk, and from 60 down, not just 18, 19-year-old, college students. Adults who learned there 40 years ago, who drive up early in the morning and they have their place for their, what do they call it, tailgate, where they one of the places happened to be, I was staying in the Chabad house, and the Chabad house in those days before they built the big new building, so they had an auxiliary building in the back, and that's where guests stayed. But that, they explained to me, Friday night, said, look, tomorrow morning when you wake up, there's going to be a car parked in the place right by the building, because when we bought the building from the guy, he asked us if the people who tailgate, it's only 5 or 6 times a year, right, it's not a big deal, if they can keep tailgating in that place, because finding a place to tailgate, that's like, harder than finding a wife. So fine. So these 4 couples, mid-50s, by the time I woke up to go to the mikveh and learn a little Chassidus, they were there already. The barbecue was going, but the drinks were fast and furious. They were rip-roaring drunk by 11 in the morning. But these are supposedly adults. Right? And then they walk to the stadium, which is about 4 hours away, and everybody they see, they go, oh, go Gators, go Gators, right? And it was like the most wild experience. I honestly, I never saw anything so bizarre in my life. It was, okay, I have no problem. College students being idiots, that's existential. These are 50-year-old people, 60-year-old people. These are supposed to be adults. These are,
That's why it's so awesome.
These people, awesome, great. Right. Baruch Hashem. Ashreinu matev chalkeinu, that we have nothing to do with that. It was unbelievable. I never saw a lower expression of human behavior. Right? And these people were right down there. It's not like they were driving, jalopies up from Miami. There was a Mercedes parked in the thing. These guys are making a living, right? And then, of course, the really scary part was as they walked back. I shouldn't say walked. As they weaved back from the game, which was just down. We could hear, every time they scored a touchdown, we could hear it 5 blocks away. The whole earth shook. They weaved their way to the car, and they got in the car, and they all drove home. I don't know how they don't all kill themselves on the way home. And you'd say, oh, the women are driving. The women are as low as the men, right? They drank as much as the men, which is really disgusting. Men are disgusting. Why did men have to make women disgusting? Because the women decided that they wanted to be liberated and be as stupid as men. Okay, so now they're liberated. They can be as stupid as men. Yay. Good job, womanhood. Right? Okay. It was unbelievable. So that's an ox. Right? What's a sheep? Oxen go to movies. Oh, wow, what a movie, man. The beginning, like 4 universes blew up before the movie even started. Like, wow, the credits. Smash, universes blowing up, spaceships crashing into each other. Wow, what a movie. That's an ox. Then there's the shiur. He doesn't go to movies. He watches film.
With the set, right?
He watches film. Yes, the seh, the sheep. Oh, it's a very interesting film. There's an I in between the L and the M for intelligent people. It's a very interesting film. Yes. Swedish director, very sophisticated. Yes. Right? Is he a behemoth? He's a behemoth. I think you'd probably rather have rather have nothing to do with him, personally. But if you had to have one of them in your living room, you'd probably rather have him because he won't eat the furniture, whereas the first guy might, break the furniture. Okay. But in terms of actually hanging out with someone and talking to someone, probably the first guy is easier to take because the second guy is just so full of himself. It's like you can't handle it. Okay. But there's different levels of Yetzer Hara. So, and the sophisticated film watcher, no Yetzer Hara? What do you mean? That's his Yetzer Hara, his sophistication. Right? He's just so impressed with himself. Interestingly enough, to bring it all home, who's harder to get to yeshiva? The ox or the sheep? The sheep. Because he's so full of himself. And he's so impressed with his sophistication. To get him to try to change his life, he's already found, he's in Harvard, he's in Oxford, he's in Cambridge. We get very few students from those places because they're taught that they are the creme de la creme, and everything they're doing is just, they are the most important people in the world, and why would they ever want to change? I mean, they're the best. Whereas your average guy from a normal place, and the normal place doesn't have to be, southeastern Louisiana Tech. It can just be, like a normal school that isn't all about me being the reason God created the world, which you all are, but I mean, that isn't what you're learning in, Michigan. But so those people are more open. The ox is, interesting enough, more open to change, which is interesting. It's easier to talk to him, right? The sophisticate, oh my gosh, he's so hard to talk to. He's got an appointment on MSNBC in a minute. I mean, he can't talk to you. It's interesting. But what's that important? Every single one of us probably has a little bit of both. Certain things we might be sort of like an ox relative to, and certain things we might more be like a sheep. And we have to be aware of those things. And the sheep is just as much a behemoth as the ox. He's more sophisticated. There's no question. The guy watching the Swedish movie is much more sophisticated than the Swedish film. I'm sorry, is much more sophisticated than the guy watching. What was the guy, the governor of California? Killed 47 people before the movie even started. Okay. But less behemoth, more behemoth. It's all still behemoth, right? The guy watching the football game and the lady with her opera glasses. Well, isn't the soprano supreme? I have to do this in an English accent. I don't know why that is. I feel bad picking on the English. But oh, she's supreme, the soprano. Okay. So what, she's not Nefesh Bahamas? She's there because it's all an expression of eloquence? She's Nefesh Bahamas. She's a different one. So don't pick on her and don't pick on him anymore, meaning they both have their issues, they both have their things they're dealing with, just like you do and just like I do, and okay, and do your best. Avos Yisrael is loving them both. If they're Yidden, you love them as much as you love yourself and more, and you'll do anything you can to try to help them in any way you can. Beseder, this one might be a little more difficult, this one might be a little less difficult. Okay, say them. That's the way Nefesh Bahamas works. And that's why the Pasuk says what it says. Adam ki Yaakov, a person who wants to come close to the Eibishter, Mikem, depends on you. Mikem korban levaya, you have to bring a korban to a vaya. What from your behemoth? What's your behemoth? Might be a behemoth, might be a shiur, might be a bakar, might be a tzoin, might be an ox, might be a sheep, might be a little more crass, a little less crass, a little more subtle, a little less subtle, whatever it is. Those are the cards the Eibishter dealt me, and those are the cards I have to deal with, and I can, by definition. The Eibishter will give me whatever keiches I need to deal with that and elevate that and express that in a positive way. So even the Florida Gator fan has hope. Though it was hard to see. Because the shaliach took me on the way. He said, I just want you to see what I put up with. So we walked down the street and we went to the Jewish fraternity a block from the stadium. I think the game started at 3, so we went there at about 2:15. So they were, I don't know whether they remember we were there, probably not. But just so I should meet the Jewish students on campus. It wasn't the most uplifting experience of my life, I must say. But okay, those Jewish students have a nefesh elokis, and every single one of them can serve God in a very serious way. And who knows if some of them who I met that day, who were not exactly expressing their nefesh elokis as powerfully as they were expressing their nefesh bahamis, who knows if those people, some of those people today aren't sitting, learning chassidus, davening, who knows? All sorts of amazing things happen. Because everybody can do that, because that's the nature of it. And what's really amazing is not only can everybody do it, even me.
The shliach must have felt very reassured when he left.
What?
The shliach must have felt very reassured when he left.
What, that from the fraternity?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's sort of used to this is what there is, But they all knew him and they loved him. Oh, Rabbi, it was like they were so excited when he showed up.
And I'm sure it felt good that he had a job.
Oh, he definitely has a job. There's no doubt about that. Right? Definitely. But okay. I mean, Baruch Hashem, he doesn't have to deal with the 50-year-old tailgaters. I mean, I think that would be harder. The students, at least, their brains aren't completely stewed yet. So that's the Bakar and the Tzayin and the Pasuk. Hein heima prate madregas the yeshnam nefesh bamis. The Rebbe says this is no. Some nefesh bamis will be a shor nagach, very, very wild person. And some people will be tzayin. Some people will be more emotional. Some people will be more intellectual. The intellectual better than the emotional person? No, they both have their trials and tribulations. They both have their challenges to deal with. The person who's very emotional has to learn how to express a little, who's very intellectual has to express a little emotion now and then, get excited about the Eibishter. The person who's very emotional has to be able to temper that emotion and express it in a very tikkundika way, in a very positive and directed way. And how does that happen? Well, that's intellect, the cool waters of intellect dripping on the fire of emotion to make sure that the fire is a fire under control. Okay. Right? Everybody has their inyonim. Right? And the last thing someone should say, but you hear it all the time, that's why I'm throwing it out there. Right? If you talk to them about saying, oh, well, I'm a X kind of person, which means don't expect me to do things that are, difficult for me because I'm an X kind of person, whatever that is. I'm very an emotional type of person, or I'm a very this kind of person, all right? Okay, say that, fine. So give me a lecture in yourself. Okay, stop talking about yourself and maybe think about God a little bit. And so beside God gave you powers in that sense. He gave you, very Baruch Hashem, a beautiful intellect that really understands things very well. Okay, that's good. But he also gave you powers of emotion, and those powers of emotion have to be expressed in a positive way. And so somehow you're going to have to figure out the balance between those and express it all, as opposed to saying, well, I'm a sort of, X kind of person. Okay, anybody who ever says that, all they mean by saying that, the context of it is almost always shirking a challenge relative to certain behavior. Almost always. I mean, you can never say always about anything, right? Isn't that right? What's that thing? What's the word in English for things that all some things are false. All some things are false. There's an English word when you make some sort of statement about something as if it's always like this. So
assumptions.
All what?
Superlatives?
No. Anyway, sorry. That English word is in part of the millions of brain cells in my brain that are dying at such an incredible rate. So it'll come back though. All generalizations, right? All generalizations are false, right? Good deal.
Go ahead.
Thank you. All generalizations are false. Okay, so that's So there's different types of things, different types in the Yetzer Hara. So that has to do with our relationship with ourselves, in understanding that if I have a certain type of Yetzer Hara, that means by definition the Eibusher is giving me the koyach to deal with that type of Yetzer Hara, as opposed to use that as an excuse for not doing what it is that I'm supposed to do in Eilam Hazeh. But that's also, and this is extremely important, especially in the context of a bunch of young men living in close contact with each other, which is, a recipe for disaster if they're not careful. That means you don't judge other people in their Yiddishkeit, because you don't know what their inyanim are. You do your relationship with the Eibusher the best way you can do. You want to help other people do theirs, help them, but not through judging them that you're now their mashpia. You're not their mashpia, you're their friend. And stay out of their kishkas unless they invite you in. If they invite you in, so then they're asking you for advice. If not, get out of their life in those inyanim. They didn't ask for your advice. I'm sure they have a mashpia. I'm sure they have friends they talk about these things with, and they didn't ask for your advice. And it's so important because people can get into that natural competition. Men tend to be competitive. So in yeshiva, what can happen? It's a frum competition. Who's frummer than who? Which is complete klipa. And Baruch Hashem, I don't know how it happened around here, but this place has always been a place where that doesn't happen, and that is one of the single greatest successes of Mayanot. That's why people feel it's a user-friendly place, because no one's looking into their kishkas and checking the length of their tzitzis. Everybody's appreciative of the fact that everybody here is on their own journey and they're doing it their way and they're going to make it the right way. That doesn't mean teachers aren't challenging people. They have to challenge. That's what a teacher does. Students don't. It's not your job. Your job is to be his friend and support him in everything he does. That doesn't mean you go to the bar with him, right? But you support him, right? The teachers, leave it to them. They know what they're doing. It's so important. It really is, and it's mamish what makes this place successful. I mean, it really is. I've been watching this for the last how long have we been around? 27 years, 28 years? I don't know. Figure out how many millions of dollars we're trying to raise next year, and that'll be the year. If it's 2.9, then we're year 29. If it's 2.8, it's year 28. I don't know. Right? That's how you know how long we've been around. That's how I know. Well, okay, and I mean that's serious. It's so important. And Baruch Hashem, you guys are amazing. And it's not a given. Not a given. Very easy to get into the I know what's best for you, your service of God. No, you don't. Leave him alone. Hopefully you know what's best for your service of God. And if you don't, Dr. Mashpia. V'zeu she'emer, and this is why it says at the end of the pasuk, after the parentheses, K'mavur barichas b'kuntus atfila, the Rebbe Shab wrote 4 kontresim to give to the Talmidim and Temchei Tamimim in the early days of Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Rebbe Shab, of course, is the one who opened Temchei Tamimim in the year Tafresh Nun Zayin. So he opened Temchei Tamimim, and he established his son, the author of this Maamer, as the Rosh Yeshiva at the age of 15, and the Rebbe Shab often went away and wrote kontresim to the students, kontras avoda, kontras eitzachayim, kontras umayin, and kontras atfila. A kontras is again like a pamphlet. These are long pamphlets, but it's like a pamphlet on tefillah. And in kontras atfila, which the Rebbe wrote in Tafresh Samach, 125 years ago. And this is why the end of the pasuk says that you'll sacrifice your sacrifice. Whose sacrifice can you sacrifice? Yours. You can't sacrifice mine. You can sacrifice yours, and I can sacrifice mine. Why? Because mine's different than yours. Mine might be a bakar, and yours might be a tzayin, or vice versa. Right? Mine's a goat with a little bit of sheep and a lot of ox, and yours is just all sheep. You're just a little shepsel. Right, which is nice. Shepslach are cute, right? But shepslach aren't tremendously exciting, right? I mean, what does a sheep do? He puts his head in the rear end of the sheep in front of him and follows what he does, Where's he going? Well, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going, but wherever he goes, I'm going. That's sheep. They're so closely packed together. I remember we used to, for a few years, my wife and I lived out in the liberated territories, and one of the guys there had about 200 or 300 head of sheep, which was a great thing to do in the afternoon with your kids. You can walk down and go see the sheep. That was like a lot of, if I was babysitting the kids, it was a nice walk, and the kids loved it, and the sheep were cute, and and we'd walk home. So he'd take them out sometimes, and you'd see them out in the field. It's so fascinating. He had a couple of dogs for his sheep. The dogs would be keeping the sheep close together, and I saw this. It was unbelievable. The dog wants to get around to the other side of the sheep. What's the fastest way? On top of the sheep. They're so closely packed together, he would jump on a sheep and walk across the top of the sheep and jump down the other side to get the sheep on the other side in line. They're mamish. That's a sheep. What's everybody doing? Conformists. Okay. Conformists. I remember once Zalman Posner asked a very, very amazing question. His brother just passed away, his younger brother. If people know Shmuley Posner from BU, so his father just passed away. Shavalichtika Gan Eden. Zalman Posner once asked a very interesting question. What's the opposite of a conformist? So what does everybody say? Non-conformist. Right? He said, no. What does a conformist do? Conformist looks around, sees what everybody's doing, and he does the same thing. What does a non-conformist do? Looks around and sees what everybody does, and he does the opposite. Both of them are guided by exactly the same thing. What's that? What everybody's doing. They're guided either positively or negatively, but they're not making up their own mind as to what should be done. They're just looking around, seeing what's going on, and then reacting either positively or negatively. What's the opposite of a conformist? An idealist. Someone who believes in something. What does he do? What he believes in? Do people do it? Well, whether they do or they don't. That's not what is ultimately guiding him. What's guiding him? Truth. That's a Yid. That's a Chassid. What does the Yid believe in? The Eibishter, shiur, Torah, mitzvahs, Rebbe. Okay. So what's his life guided by? Eibishter, Torah, mitzvahs, bringing Mashiach. What does the Rebbe want from me? How does the Rebbe understand my Avodas Hashem should work? Because I trust him in understanding what's best for me in my service of God. Okay? And what does that entail? What everybody's doing? Sometimes. What no one's doing? Sometimes. Doesn't matter, right? What difference does it make? So the last thing a chassid is a sheep. But also he shouldn't be an ox. It's also true. There's an amazing Gemara in Menachos. Gemara is trying to explain you want to eat a duck. Right? People eat duck. Right? So now you find a duck. And how do you know whether the duck is a kosher duck or he might be what's called a treifa? Treifa doesn't mean a duck is kosher. But what if he's sick? If he's a sick duck, so then when you shecht him and you open him up and you see that he would have died even if you didn't shecht him, so then that's what's called a treifa, and he's not kosher. Same with animals, right? You shecht the cow and you open up the cow and you look in the cow and you check its lungs, and if the cow had a disease that would have killed it without the shechita, so then the cow's not a kosher cow, and that cow is sold to non-Jews by the butcher. And that's why butchers have to be God-fearing, because they lose money that way, but you trust them to do that because they're not going to give you non-kosher meat, because only they would know. Okay. Someone once went to the Tzemach Tzedek and asked you to be a teacher or a butcher, and the Tzemach Tzedek said, you don't have enough fear of heaven to be a butcher, you should be a teacher. Butchers have to have a lot of fear of heaven. And so how do you know, the Gemara says, how do you know a duck is kosher? That it's not sick? Put it in a river with a stream. If it floats downstream, it's probably sick. If it swims against the current, it's a healthy duck. Wow. How do you know whether a Jew is healthy? Does he just float downstream with everybody else, or does he swim against the current? If he swims against the current, he's healthy.
Same by fish. All kosher fish can swim upstream.
Oh yeah? Okay, there you go. Salmon certainly do. Right. Okay. Let's go a couple of more lines and then we'll stop. No shiur Sunday because of the tiyul. Right, you guys aren't around.
Yeah.
There'll be
You're
a
not
shiur.
coming, Rabbi?
No, we're gonna
I'm not
be-
coming. Sometimes I do. I mean, I have in the summer, but okay. And that's why at the end of the pasuk says "Takrivis korbanchem." Everybody sacrifices their korban because everybody has their own korban. I don't know what their korban is. That's why I can't judge them. Not sure what their korban is. They might be dealing with things that if I had to deal with, I'd turn into a ball and sit in the corner. Right? And they're just amazing, these people. Who knows? We don't know. So don't judge. Vehine, but korban agashmi, let's just see where the Rebbe is going to take us, then we'll stop. But korban agashmi, in the physical korban, husha mavin behem agashmi salgabi mizbeach, that which is, we bring the physical korban on top of the altar. What used to happen in the first Beis HaMikdash? A miracle. What's that miracle? V'haya eish shelamayla. There was a fire from above. What's that fire? K'di'isa b'yuma, like the Gemara Yuma says, Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, Revutza Ka'ari, crouched like a lion. What was it that was crouched like a lion? So Rashi explains. Gecheles, the coal, C-O-A-L, like a burning coal from a barbecue. The coal, a burning fire, Shanafla Mina Shemaim, that fell from heaven in the times of the first Beis HaMikdash, Bimei Shlomo, in the days of Shlomo Melech, V'hai Salam Mizbeach. We would put the korban on the fire that we had on the Mizbeach. How did the Mizbeach work? The Mizbeach was huge, right? And in the corner of the Mizbeach, there was a light, Eish Tamid Tukar Al Mizbeach Lo Yisichbe. You say it every day in Korbanis. A pasuk in Parshas Tzav, there was a constant fire, 24/7. There was a fire burning in the corner, the pilot light of the Mizbeach. And if you we make a maracha, a pile of wood, and in the middle of the Mizbeach, we put the animals on that pile of wood. How do we light that pile of wood? Oh, we'd throw Kingston charcoal that already had the oil in it, and we'd flick a bick and light it. No, that's not how it worked in those days. We would take burning wood from the pilot light, move it to the big fire, light that fire with the wood that was over there, and then put the korban on. Fine. So there was a fire from below that we lit. Go on. What would happen in the first Beis HaMikdash? A fire in the form of a lion would pounce on the korban from above and devour the korban. Whoa. Okay. So the Gemara says it was Ravutza Ka'ari, crouched like a lion. Ubazayar, in the Zayar it says Isa Arya the Ochel Karbonim, the lion that devours Karbonis. I just want you to see this line, and then we'll stop, and we'll continue on Monday. Oh, that's what it was like on the korban, on the altar. So too, when we sacrifice our nefesh habahamis, there's also a fire from above. What's the fire from above? Hine kamechen hu ba'aveda b'nefesh adam. Right. So too, in the service of the soul of a person, hara yesh eish milamayla. There's a fire from above, and what's that? Hu arishvei eish b'nefesh elokis. That's the burning, fiery, passionate love of the nefesh elokis, of the godly soul for the Eibishter. Oh, so what are we trying to sacrifice? Our nefesh habahamis. What might I think? Well, it's all about discipline from below. Well, that discipline from below has to be there. Has to be a fire from below. Without a fire from below, it doesn't work. But that's not all that happens. What is there also? There's a fire from above. What's the fire from above? That essential love that you have for Kadosh Baruch Hu from your nefesh elokis. So you're not just a nefesh habahamis trying to somehow control itself so that it behaves well. When you teach a dog to scratch at the door and go make outside, so you haven't elevated the dog out of doggyhood. He's just a well-behaved dog. Now he doesn't make on the carpet, he makes on the grass, next to the tree, depending male, female. Okay, good dog, good boy. And you give him a milk bowl, and he's happy. It's a dog. It's cute. What does a dog mean? Kulei leiv. He's all leiv. He's all midas. No brain, just midas. Okay, fine. Have you elevated him? No. He's just well behaved. Okay, so that isn't Avodas Hashem. Avodas Hashem isn't just training our nefesh bahamis to be well behaved, which it's part of it. But real Aveda is what? Is bringing the fiery love of the Nefesh Elokis into our conscious realities. So the Korban on the base of Mikdash had two aspects. The fire from below, which is the Aveda with the Nefesh Bahamis itself, and the fire from above, which is the fiery love of the Nefesh Elokis, and that we have to connect to that part of us and realize that there's a part of us that is naturally inclined to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when you see another Jew, what are you trying to touch? That part of them. You have to get through their Nefesh Bahamis to that part of them. But when you see another Jew, what do you realize he has? He has a Nefesh Elokis. So of course he wants to serve God. So if you're going to put tefillin on him, you're just trying to tap into that Nefesh Elokis. Now you're going to have to do that through his Nefesh Bahamis. But he's got a Nefesh Elokis in there. That's, in yeshiva, what's our problem? We have a problem. Who's I talking about this with? Oh, Danny Siegel. What's our problem in yeshiva? We can't get people in the door. It's just so hard to get Jews in the door. Same Chabad house on campus. How many kids on your campus ended up in Chabad house? 250 every Friday night. Amazing. How many kids on campus? 3,500. The other 3,250. I'm not blaming the shluch. Those other, where are they? Can't get them to show up. Just can't get them in the door. But what do we all know? Once you get them in the door, they love it. Why do they love it? Because they never sell keys. What's our biggest problem here in Mayanot? We can't get anybody in the door. I mean, Baruch Hashem, we get people in the door, but I mean, how many Jews are out there, right? And how many people do we actually get in the door? How many people who get in the door don't like it? There are, but majority or minority? Serious minority. Almost everybody likes it. Right? That's why, as a recruiter, when I go out recruiting, what am I always selling? 3 weeks in the winter, 5 weeks in the summer. Why? Okay, 3 weeks. That's not so bad. I can handle that. They come for 3 weeks. Best recruiting tool we've got. Why? They come for 3 weeks and go, wow, this is the greatest. So some of them just never leave. No, some people don't leave because they don't have to leave. Other people have to leave. They've got what they're doing. They really had 3 weeks. They have to go back to college, whatever they're doing. Okay, what almost always happens, they come back because they say, I want more. Why do we like it so much? Your Nefesh Elokis loves it. He just loves it, and that penetrates into your Nefesh Bahamis. A Jew loves Torah and mitzvahs, and the Nefesh Bahamis goes, wow, this is really nice. Why didn't anybody tell me about this? I don't know. For whatever reason, most of the Jews in the world had their Judaism stolen from them at some point in the previous 3 generations. Some generation decided to steal it from the children. Not because they didn't like them. They did it with all the right intentions, but they made a terrible mistake. Right? And so some of them are lucky enough to find it again. And why do we like it so much? Our Nefesh Elokis loves it. Our Nefesh Bahamis can often be open to that. And you didn't like that. I'll tell you one quick story. I know it's late, but I heard this secondhand. I heard it from Yossi Paltiel, who heard it, actually I guess third hand, heard it from the father of the Shaliach. A Shaliach in Northern California. For some reason, he went to an army base to talk to the major general that ran the army base, because I guess there were Jewish soldiers on the armies. I don't know. He ended up talking to the major general. Major general was an American, an Afro-American. When the time the story happened, he was called a Black American, but now he's called an Afro-American. Right? He was talking to the rabbi, and he said to the rabbi, my great-grandmother was Jewish. Now, you know the end of the story, of course. That was his grandmother's mother, who was his mother's mother, who is his mother. So he's as Jewish as Moshe Rabbeinu, this guy, this black major general in the American army. So the shliach says to him, your life's over, you're a Jew. So what do you mean I'm Jewish? So that Judaism goes through matrilineal descent, and you're as Jewish as I am, you're as Jewish as anybody else. Really? Yeah. Well, so the guy says, well, you know what? You should do something Jewish. Okay. What should I do? I have some tefillin with me. I want you to put on tefillin. This guy says, I don't know. That's the way. I don't know. That's not like it. No, that's a little too much. Can I do something else? His wife, I don't know why his wife was in the room, but it must have been, I don't know, that doesn't matter. His wife was in the room, and his wife, who's not Jewish in any way, shape, or form, said to him, so she doesn't have a Yetzirah. So she said, yeah, come on, put it on. You said you're Jewish. Why not do something Jewish? Okay, fine. So it took them about 20 minutes to roll up those military sleeves, with the major general with the starch in the sleeve. You could cut a loaf of bread with this crease in his shirt. Okay, fine. So they roll up his sleeve and they wrapped Phil in arm. He says, okay, say after me, Shema, Shema, Yisrael, Yisrael. The guy couldn't say the next word. He's crying like a baby. So he's like freaked out. He says, what do you say? What are you getting me to say? What are you doing to me? He thinks there's some like magic here, like the guy's putting a spell on him or something. So what's going on here? Nothing. Well, why am I crying? What's going on with me? Why can't I control my emotions right now? This is a major general in the army. I assume he probably controls those emotions pretty well. I said, because you have a Jewish soul. And it just was discovered. And it's expressing itself in saying Shema Yisrael. The guy didn't know what to do with himself. That's Yiddish. Now, I don't know what happened to that major general. I don't imagine that he's, some Bubba Verchassid today. He moved to Borough Park. I doubt that somehow. Okay. But what does he have in him the same way you do? That's Nefesh Elokis. That poor Nefesh Elokis was so trapped under, generations of not even knowing. But when it was allowed to express itself, he broke down. Okay, so that's a story about him. Why can't that story be about me? I'll have a Nefesh Elokis. Now, I don't have to be a black major general in the American Army in order to, have some serious connection to my Nefesh Elokis. And Aveda is all about trying to figure out how to get the Nefesh Elokis to illuminate and express itself in our conscious reality, which is our Nefesh Abamis. Conscious you is your Nefesh Abamis. It's conscious you connected to essential you. That's hard to do. Okay, that's what Aveda is all about. That's what the Rebbe just taught us. That's the first pasuk in Vayikra. Right? Bring a korban, and when a korban's brought, what's it all about? Getting the Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Abamis, and what we'll see next year. And I'm sorry it's so late, and it's also a Thursday. What we'll see next year is how to do that. How do you get in touch with that Nefesh Elokis? The Rebbe tells us how to do it. He doesn't say it's a nice idea and leave us alone. Okay.